when you take investment, you're also giving something away. It's not just as simple as someone coming in and saying, there's a pot of money, there you go, do what you want with it.
Love Luxury is 100% privately owned. So I'd love to know, have you guys considered getting external investors? Looking back, would you change that? Or are you happy with the decision of being 100% privately owned?
So yeah, you're right. We are 100% privately owned. And we have looked into getting investors in the past. We did at the very beginning when we took off. We grew really quickly. And there was a point where we were thinking, maybe we need some investment here. Maybe we do. But when you take investment, you're also giving something away. It's not just as simple as someone coming in and saying, there's a pot of money, there you go, do what you want with it. You're giving away part of the control of your company, the power. Somebody else has to be on the decision-making processes. And also you're giving away some of your profits too. You know, you're giving away a percentage of your company and a percentage of your profits. So for us, it wasn't in the long run something that we wanted to do. Maybe we could have grown even faster than we have grown. But the truth of the matter is that Adam and I really wanted to keep our business to ourselves. And we didn't want to give somebody a slice of the cake. We didn't. And I feel that it's the best decision we made. And all we do is we just keep reinvesting the money rather than pulling it out. And that way it grows faster anyway.
And external investment isn't much needed for all business models. If there's a business model like yours where you can see revenue coming in and in a straight route to profitability, why bring investors in?
Usually the reason why historically companies were going public was to raise money, right? Because it's the best way to raise a large amount of money, and you need a large amount of money to do large things, right? But today there's a lot of capital also in the private markets.
In 2024, talabat was the largest tech IPO in the world. Congratulations on that. I'd love for you to tell us practically, though, how did you guys make it happen?
Well, practically, when you start, there's a lot of legal and company restructuring process. For example, we didn't have a company to list. So talabat was kind of a set of companies. We had one for this country, one for this business line and whatever, but there was no holding company that will all the other companies will fall into to list. And so we had to do all that restructuring work at the beginning. There was a lot of legal paperwork and whatever. And I think all that part is where the CEO is not much involved, and a lot of the burden is on the CFO and the legal team, etc. And then what I think is more the fun part begins, where you have to kind of write down your story and say, okay, what they call the equity story. So why should someone invest in this company, right? And we were all like, oh, look what we built in the past, etc. And the bankers told us, this is rubbish. Like, this is not what you should be talking about, because it's nothing about what you did in the past. It's all about what you're going to do in the future, right? And if you're kind of a startup founder, usually you start with kind of a long-term objective, but then all your successive fundraising are like, okay, look at the results of the past. I'm kind of moving towards my objective, but it's more about look at what I achieved in the past, right? The IPO is all about look at the next 5 to 10 years, right? How is the equity story evolving, right? And so that kind of was a mindset shift for all of us.
And if you can pinpoint one thing that you guys, the team, did super well that got you guys there, what would that be?
I think it was we had a tight team working at the IPO. I think at some point it got to 200 plus people, but everybody was really working night and day to make it happen. But everybody was also so excited to make it happen. So I think when you do something that you really love and when you're excited about something, it's kind of doesn't matter the amount of hours you have to put in, you will do it with pleasure, right? I think that was the mood, that was the spirit, and that's what kept all of us united throughout the IPO. And actually, when my CFO and I went on the road, I was feeling a lot of pressure. I was feeling a lot of pressure because there was so much work that was being done for the IPO. And then it was all on us to kind of convey the message and have the investors invest. If we were not convincing in that part, like, and people were not investing, all the work that all these people have done would have gone to waste. So we felt very kind of honored, but also a lot of responsibility to for all the people that worked on the IPO to make it happen.
And having gone through the entire process, a lot of the entrepreneurs that have their own startups, everyone's path is, I want to be listed, I want to hit IPO. Do you think this is a feasible path for everyone?
It depends on what's your product and what's your objective, right? Going public is not something, I mean, depends, why do you want to go public? That would be my question, right? And usually the reason why historically companies were going public was to raise money, right? Because it's the best way to raise a large amount of money, and you need a large amount of money to do large things, right? But today there's a lot of capital also in the private markets, right? And there's also exits in the private markets, right? So it depends on what you want to do. If you want to build a company and you want to be with that company for your 20 years or whatever, I think that's possibly a path. But if your idea is like, I'm going to build this, I'm going to bring it to this point, and then I'm going to sell the company, I'm going to do something else, doesn't necessarily mean you have to go to do an IPO.
You know, I put 8 or 10 years of my life into this, and what do I have to show for it? And I think once you pass that stage where you feel like you've built something and you have something to show for the 10 years you put into it, I think you start to become a little more content.
It's clear that you found deep partnerships, because I believe you got acquired, right? By Etisalat. So tell me more about that.
I think that wasn't by design. It's not something we had set out to achieve. We saw them from day one as a very strategic commercial and technology partner, because the reality is we were using their infrastructure and we needed their payment support as well. So it was almost like a match made in heaven, because 10 years ago, right, if you're using YouTube, except for the bandwidth consumption, the ISP or the telco is not getting any revenue or any cut out of that, other than the fact that you're using more bandwidth. And what our model did is we came up with a revenue share model for every time, you know, Dania signs up for the service and pays through the mobile phone. We have a certain revenue share with the partner. So this created a commercial relationship, not just using the bandwidth, but created a commercial relationship. And this gave them an incentive for us to work together and scale this business. And you know, telcos are very, very measured organizations. They're extremely methodical and extremely measured. And so over the years, they watched us, they tracked us, saw what we were doing. And then, you know, came a point where they're like, okay, it makes sense to become a shareholder in this business. And we're very fortunate.
How was that for you? Like the moments that happened, how did you feel?
It was a very long, drawn out process. But eventually when it did happen, it's like obviously it's a lot of celebration, but the thing that I remember the most is just burden being lifted off your chest. I think that's the part that I remember the most.
Everyone I ask says the same thing. Burden lifted, relief. I'm like, guys, where's the fun?
I think for me, it's also the burden lifted, because I think what happens is after, you know, for us, it was 8 years. And after 8 years, you know, you're carrying the dreams of so many people, you know, your family, yourself, maybe your parents, if you're fortunate and blessed to have parents in your life. And it's less about, hey, if the business fails, what am I going to do? So that's, I think, less of a concern. The bigger concern is, you know, I put 8 or 10 years of my life into this, and what do I have to show for it? And I think once you pass that stage where you feel like you've built something and you have something to show for the 10 years you put into it, I think you start to become a little more content and at peace with that burden. But until you reach that point, the burden is there.
Too many people think that winning is raising money and running, but like once you're on that treadmill, you can't get off.
Because the startup scene has been like growing a lot in the Middle East, anyone who wants to start a business, they're like, yes, I'm going to go for the high growth startup model. I'm going to hit IPO. I'm going to do all of this. But then you look back and you're like, this can be a traditional business that can bring you consistent, good money. Not every business model requires also investment.
I agree. Too many people think that winning is raising money and running, but like once you're on that treadmill, you can't get off. If you take high cost, high growth equity capital, you have got to deliver to the end, because otherwise you disappoint these investors. Often their terms can have consequences for you. And that's when people start to think of capital as somehow aggressive or bad. No, they gave you their money and they are holding you accountable to objectives that you promised them when you took the money. And so don't take that money if you're not ready to be on that journey for the long haul. And also, it may not be needed. If you can have a profitable service business or a profitable software company and scale the business organically, that it can be even more rewarding, often financially, because you dilute as well when you sell capital, even more rewarding journey, but also one where you have real wealth. Because being rich is having money. Being wealthy is having money and having time. What keeps me up at night is a world where we could build a $500 billion company and have the people who backed it when it was a crazy idea make nothing, or management make nothing, the people who gave their lives to it, right? That's the kind of stuff that keeps you up at night. And also, if I'm honest, keeps me motivated when it's gotten hard and I've thought, I should hire somebody else to run this and I should go be on the board and do something else, right? But then I reflect on, I love it. I really do. And I'm like, recently when we won awards and we had our new products on the shelf, I'm just like, this is why I do this. It was wonderful. But then I look at the people that gave their lives to me in this company. You know, I look at how hard my team works and how they believe in it and they count on me. And I think those are the times when you sit here thinking the hours to EBITDA don't make sense. What am I doing? I try to say, all right, if not for yourself, do it for these people. So ask me if it was worth it when we see where we land. You know, we're trying to get the company to a scale that it could list in, call it 27, 28, at least be ready by 27, but list in 28 or 29 based on the market timing, prospects, pipeline, you name it. That's where we're trying to head. And I'm trying to hold that line. So ask us when we get there. We thought that journey would be a great story. We have some of those. There's the Spinnies is a domestic company that's raised and gone public, but there are not a million of them. And we want to be one of the people to try to set that path. A mission-driven, homegrown brand that exports its brand, its products, its technology. We did not copy paste here. We build and sell to other people. Singapore is working with us on exporting our technology to Singapore, not the other way around. How many companies have done that at this region? Not a lot, not none, but not a lot. So that's where we want to head. When we get to that milestone, I think then I'll be able to say, yes, it was worth it. If I somehow crash and burn along the way or something goes terribly wrong, probably will feel difficult. I mean, of course, the learning and the journey will have been great, but the sacrifices will be difficult to stomach.